Welcome to the debrief. At least 2 are dead after a school shooting in California. Authorities say a 16-year-old shot 5 people at Saugus High School, which is about 30 miles outside Los Angeles. The LA County Sheriff says a 14-year-old boy and a 16-year-old girl were both killed. 2 14-year-old girls and a 15-year-old boy were also shot and injured. Video is said to show the suspect pulling a handgun from his backpack and shooting those victims. He then turned the gun on himself and shot himself in the head. The suspect is in custody in critical condition at a hospital. The U.S. Supreme Court scheduled tomorrow to consider whether or not to hear the last-minute appeal of death row inmate Rodney Reed. Reed and his attorneys say he's innocent of the rape and murder of Stacey Stites in 1996. His attorneys, working with the Innocence Project, filed motions to stop his execution, claiming new witnesses have come forward to back up Reed's claim that he was in a consensual sexual relationship with Stites. The defense says the victim's fiancé even confessed to her murder while he was in prison on other charges. Texas still wants to execute Reed in 6 days. The star witness for the defense has taken the stand in a Florida quadruple murder retrial. Prosecutors are trying Henry Segura on charges he killed his girlfriend Brandi Peters, their 3-year-old son, and Peters' twin 6-year-old daughters. The state says the motive was $20,000 in unpaid child support, which prevented Segura from getting a 6-figure job as a welder in Afghanistan. But Segura says Peters was a drug mule who was killed by a cartel who caught her stealing money. James Carlos Santos testified for the defense that he's the one who ordered the 4 murders. He says he vouched for victim Brandi Peters to get her involved with drug running. But when Santos found out Peters was stealing from his cartel, he says he had to order a hit on her while he was in prison. Santos was in state custody for grand theft and robbery. He's now in federal prison for writing a letter threatening the Florida governor. Santos pleaded the 5th at Segura's first trial. Here's what he had to say this time around.
I met her around 2000 or 2001.
Okay, and what was the nature of your relationship with Ms. Peters?
She transported narcotics for me.
How did she do that?
She would pick up a car in Atlanta or here in Tallahassee and drive to Texas.
How did she become involved transporting drugs for you after you met her?
After having conversations with her a couple of times, I asked her would she like to make some money.
Now, at some point, you ended up going to prison, correct?
Yes, sir.
Were you able to remain in contact with your associates and continue directing your drug trafficking organization?
Yes, sir. By cell phone or mail and visits.
Did you end up directing associates of yours to kill Brandi Peters?
Yes, sir, I did.
And why was that?
She had stolen money and drugs.
You haven't always admitted that you actually ordered the hit. It's taken a lot of time for you to come forward with that information. You've provided progressively more details over years. Why is that?
Quite a few reasons. For one, I didn't want to be charged, and for 2, I wanted to make sure that it was feasible for me and my organization. At first, they didn't have a problem with the situation, but once they began to believe that it's possible that I might have been involved in her thievery, then I had to let it be known that I'm the reason why she's no longer here.
Santos says 7 people were involved with the hit, but on cross, prosecutors questioned Santos about whether he even knew the victim.
I don't recall. That's from like 2000, man. I don't remember that.
You don't really recall what she looked like?
No, I don't remember. I don't recall how old she looked. I recall what she looked like.
What she looked like?
A short, dark-skinned female.
You said she owed you money?
Yes.
Okay. $90,000?
Around that area, yes.
Where do you keep this money?
I don't know the exact address.
Don't know the exact address with all those hundreds of thousands of dollars that are being stashed.
No.
Not a very good leader of this group if you don't know where your money's being stashed.
I keep good records.
Obviously not. You don't even know where it is.
I have records. I write everything down. I have a secretary.
Is it the secretary that ordered or helped you order the death of Brandi Peters?
No, sir.
No, it wasn't.
That's not part of her job. The secretary I have now is one of my associate sisters.
One of your associate sisters?
Yes, sir.
What is this associate's name?
Carlos, the same guy that I'm always dealing with.
Mr. Santos, you've been diagnosed delusional, grandiose, narcissistic, schizophrenic, hear voices in your head, confessing to murders that didn't occur, confessing to murders you couldn't have done, now confessing to another murder you had no involvement in. Isn't that true?
No, sir, it's not.
And you say your person that you had contact with is named Carlos.
Yes, sir.
You introduce your name here today as James Santos, correct?
Yes, sir.
Isn't it true your middle name is Carlos? You are Carlos, are you not?
You mean Carlos Hernandez or not? No, I'm Carlos Santos.
On redirect, the defense tried to prove that Santos did, in fact, know the victim. They showed letters Santos wrote to the victim, later found in her home. Santos says he was writing in code.
In one of the letters, I explained about money, that if she could return $50,000 and take one trip, then the debt would be paid. I had the car waiting for her in Atlanta. I was looking for her to take the trip before Thanksgiving of 2010.
What would have happened if she had gone to Atlanta like you wanted?
More than likely, she probably would have been killed.
Because she wouldn't pay it back?
Yes, even if she had paid, she had already stolen it. She had already taken it.
So you wanted to try and recoup money and also kill
Exactly.
The defense called an expert in gangs to look for signs at the crime scene that could point to the cartel. This expert says he used to be in a gang in Mexico.
Everything that I reviewed points directly towards the Zetas. And you know, the spade, the way it was placed against the wall, it didn't have any blood, it wasn't used in the murder. It was a clear message, right? So it was all by itself, according to the pictures that I reviewed, next to the lady's body, right, on the wall. It didn't have no blood, so to me it indicated that it wasn't used in the murder itself. The viciousness of the way the children were killed, and the way the victim was, the mother was killed, you know, beaten, shot, stabbed.
So this is on the high end of violence even for cartels?
Well, it's definitely high end.
On cross-examination, the state questioned whether a Mexican cartel would even get itself involved in street-level gang activity.
Unless the street-level gang pays the cartel to do the killing, that because, for example, let's say hypothetically that these drugs or whatever the case may be were from them to begin with, then I'm sure they would.
And you're sure they would because?
Because I was a criminal myself for a long time, involved in criminal organizations, and I know how the criminal mind works. You cannot mess with cartels, or they're going to get you. They might not do it tomorrow, but they're eventually going to get you. That's why.
So the Mexican cartels are now being hired by local street gangs to commit murders in the street gangs' territories.
I don't know if they're now, but I'm sure they did at that time, in this particular case.
Here's another odd twist to this case. About a week after the murders, investigators went to a nearby park where a garbage can was on fire. The items inside the can were not completely burned. Here is direct in cross-examination.
Inside the trash can, there were a number of items located. A T-shirt that had suspected blood on it, is that right?
Yes.
And similarly, the collared shirt was recovered from inside the trash can.
Yes.
And then there were a bunch of latex gloves that had suspected blood on them as well, correct?
Yes.
And another set of gray gloves that had suspected blood.
Isn't it true that during the course of your investigation, subsequent follow-up, you determined that those trash cans in that park was cleaned up on almost a daily basis?
That's correct.
So subsequent to that, you would have learned that something that was found a week later really would have no bearing at all on the homicide itself.
That's correct.
Defendant Henry Segura took the stand yesterday to convince another jury in this case that he is not the quadruple killer. Let's pick up where we left off with cross-examination. Prosecutors hammered the defendant for at one point calling one of his other sons his younger son. Javante Segura, one of the victims, was actually his youngest son.
I have an older son and a younger son. He's the youngest of my two with my wife. So yeah, I always call him my youngest son.
You'd already killed Javante at that point, so you knew he wasn't your youngest son anymore.
Man, check this out. If I'm gonna kill Javante, why not bring him home with me and kill Brandi? That way I don't have to pay child support and I can raise my son like I want to.
Would your wife be okay with that?
She wouldn't have to be okay with it.
You said in your interview she didn't even want you giving these kids Christmas presents or
That's
going
why I
over there
said she wouldn't have to be okay with it. If I had a chance to be with my son, to take my son so he wouldn't be hurt, then me and her just wouldn't be together.
You were willing to lie to police about a murder charge of children in order to protect your wife from knowing that you were just even over at Brandi's house. But you're saying that your wife and you would have welcomed Brandi's child with you into your home and raised him as your own?
That's not what I'm saying. My wife would not have welcomed Brandi's son and my son into our home. But if I would have known my son was going to be in any danger, then yes, I most definitely would have did away with my marriage so that my son could still be here today.
New York Public Defender Anna Carlsen is with me tonight, along with New Jersey criminal defense attorney Mike Koribanics, attorney Michael Bryant, also here in the newsroom. So, Michael Bryant, what's the deal with these letters here? Do these prove a connection between this guy who's in prison who claims that he was involved and victim Brandi Peters?
Well, there's something. You know, you need to draw that connection because we really haven't heard a lot about her involvement in the drug trade. We're getting it mostly from the guy who says he put the hit out. And really, Aaron, this comes down to whether this jury believes that somebody like Mr. Carlos Santos could have pulled off this hit, could have ordered this hit, or was he just trying to be Mr. Big Man on campus? It's a weird guy to rely on for the defense, but I think he is key to this case.
Anna Carlsen, I sense a little bit of burden shifting perhaps there in what Michael Bryant is suggesting, and that always makes me nervous because that's not the way it's supposed to go.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think there's going to be major focus here on Santos, who was called by the defense. And I think that in the final analysis, the defense has a lot to consider from his testimony, even though he seems to be casually confessing involvement in multiple murders. And we have this conversation from the prosecution about whether he has delusions of grandeur, whether he's ready to confess to every murder in the state of Florida. I think he comes across maybe not as delusional, but maybe as a stone-cold killer.
Okay, maybe he also just wants to look like a tough guy. So, Mike Koribanics, my big question here is, do we have enough to convict this guy beyond a reasonable doubt, or do we have things like the trash can, the buddy gloves, all of that in the park after this investigation had unfolded, suggesting more people were involved here?
I think through circumstantial evidence, the defense, which is unusual for us to see, is creating reasonable doubt, and I think they have a very strong defense. It's just too many unbelievable things coming together.
And Michael Bryant out in the newsroom here, I think the defense is going to have to hit that hard and heavy on closing arguments. Reasonable doubt, reasonable doubt, reasonable doubt. For this reason, that reason, or the other reason, you can't convict.
I agree, and there seem to be so many holes in the prosecution's case. It just seems like the defense is putting on a better case, even though, I know, Aaron, they don't have to.
Boy, what a cast of characters. Michael Bryant, thank you for clarifying the law for us from the newsroom. Jury selection underway in the death penalty trial of a Florida man accused of murdering his wife. Authorities say a group of 3 men conspired to beat Dr. Teresa Sievers to death with a hammer at her home in 2015. Husband Mark Sievers is the accused ringleader. He apparently vomited into a trash can in court, bringing jury selection to a halt yesterday, but it's back on track, and opening statements are likely to occur this coming Wednesday. One of the co-defendants pleaded guilty. A jury convicted another, Jimmy Rogers, of second-degree murder in Dr. Sievers' death. And still ahead tonight here on the Debrief, those botched Miranda warnings in the case of Christian Bahena Rivera, who stands accused of killing Iowa college student Molly Tibbetts. We break down exactly what was said and exactly what went wrong. Day 2 of an Iowa hearing to determine whether evidence against a defendant accused of murdering a college student will be thrown out of court. Prosecutors say Christian Bahena Rivera confessed to arguing with Molly Tibbetts, confessed that there was blood, confessed to putting her in corn, and took officers to where he dumped her body. Here's the problem. The state admits the officer who did the questioning failed to read Rivera his full Miranda rights the first time around. While the state agrees Rivera's statements after that failure must be suppressed, the state wants the physical evidence, like the victim's body, to remain in evidence. Here's the officer who botched the first Miranda warning.
Did you make an effort to read Miranda warnings to Mr. Rivera shortly after he was taken into custody?
Yes.
Did you do those from memory?
Yes.
All right. You did not read them from a card?
No.
All right. And you failed to read him a Miranda warning, is that right?
Yes.
You're aware of that now.
Yes, I am.
All right. Did you fail to read in the right that anything can be used against him in court?
Yes.
Did you do that on purpose?
No.
Was that a mistake?
That was a mistake that I did.
Was there any type of plan or effort by law enforcement to read him part of his Miranda warning in order to keep Mr. Rivera talking?
No.
That officer said she was the only one present when she tried to read the rights. She said she never made any promises, though, to the defendant, and added that the defendant never admitted to stabbing Molly Tibbetts.
Did you ever tie your word help to any consequences or reward for Christian Rivera?
No, I did not.
Ms. Romero, towards the end of the interview, did Christian Rivera ask you questions related to what is going to happen to him?
Yes.
What were your responses to him?
That it was not up to me to give him that information. I was not aware of the consequences, what it was going to be.
You couldn't tell him what was going to happen to him?
Correct. I just told him that I was there to build up a report and bring it out to the other agents.
Did you ever tell him he wasn't going to be charged with any crime or any certain crimes?
No, I did not.
Did you ever make any suggestions to him that he would receive better treatment if he would confess to the murder of Molly Tibbetts?
No, I did not.
And by the way, concerning confession, Ms. Romero, did he ever make any statements to you that he recalled where he said he stabbed Molly Tibbetts?
No.
Right. He did not admit to that, is that correct?
That is correct. He did not.
That officer said she asked Rivera to take authorities to where Tibbetts was buried and that Rivera cooperated. On cross-examination, the defense asked that officer about all the different types of Miranda forms and cards in both English and in Spanish that she had access to and failed to use. Then the defense forced her to compare what she said, what was translated, and what the forms and the law actually require.
The reason for the card is so that you can have some assistance in making sure that you cover all those bases. Is that right?
That is correct.
If you could please read for the judge what it is that you claim were Miranda rights.
Okay, you have the right to remain silent.
You said you have the right to remain silent. Is that correct?
Silence, yes.
Instead of silent, it's silence. Is that right?
That's the way it was translated, yes.
Right. And then the next statement that you say, ma'am.
If you don't want to speak to me, you don't have to. You have the right to have an attorney present. If you can't pay one, we will assign to you without a charge. This is the way that I'm reading it in the transcript.
Now, ma'am, were you aware that another law enforcement officer told my client that he didn't need a lawyer?
I was not aware of that.
All right. If you were aware of that, would you have made steps to make sure that he understood that right better?
Judge, I'm going to object to this. I think that's a mischaracterization of Mr. Official's testimony.
Sustained.
This all continued with the biggest legal issue of them all, the failure to warn the defendant that what he said could be used against him in court.
All right, the next statement that you say, ma'am.
You also have the right to want to talk to me. Anything that you say could be used against you. Do you understand?
And I'm going to back up. What you actually say is you say you also have the right to, and it says comma, ... want to talk to me. Anything you say can be used against you. Is that right?
Yes.
You agree with me that what you say there is certainly not verbatim for what is on Defendant's Exhibit CC.
Yes, it's not the same.
The state is trying to get around these issues several ways, including by arguing that someone would have eventually found the body of Molly Tibbetts anyway. That's called the legal doctrine of inevitable discovery. Back now, attorneys Anna Carlsen, Mike Koribanics, and Michael Bryant. So, Koribanics, you're a former prosecutor, now you do criminal defense. Some of the issues here seem to be like translating back and forth between Spanish and English, but generally speaking, does the testimony make your skin crawl?
This is just horrible. I mean, there's nothing more sacred for any member, a prosecutor or defense, than the Miranda warnings. I mean, that ensures your case on both sides.
Yeah, look, and legally, I think the state's being at least legally fair this time around by saying, suppress the statements, go ahead, we admit this was messed up, but the law allows the physical evidence and the consent searches, the fruits of those searches, to come into the trial, and we can use everything after the second Miranda warning, which was effective. Do you agree with that?
No, I don't. I'm not a big fan of the inevitable discovery rule. I think the fruits of the poisonous tree has become so complicated, but always beware of prosecutors bearing gifts because they're giving you something to get more.
Anna, your take.
I'm going to agree with Mike. I think these warnings were just appalling. I think any juror is going to be appalled by them. I'm a criminal defense attorney, and I can't understand what she was telling this individual. It seemed like more of a friendly conversation in the places that it wasn't garbled.
Yeah, you know, one of the things we learned in the documents is that basically there were a number of officers involved with this Michael Bryant, and then Rivera asked to talk to that officer one-on-one, and then this whole mess unraveled. You know, I understand what the defense attorneys in here are saying, but Michael Bryant, again, the law has chipped away at Miranda so much over the last 25, 30 years that is Miranda really even effective at this point?
Well, I think it is. The spirit of Miranda is, and certainly the cops admitted to violating that spirit. I felt a little sorry for Officer Romero, who that night was trying to help. She could speak Spanish, could talk to the suspect at the time. You know, the state said we screwed up. She messed up. Let's move on. Let's talk about inevitable discovery. Let's talk about what goes into this case. Let's not keep beating her up and beating up this Miranda issue.
Oh, come on, Michael. Look, I mean, she's paid as a professional to sit there and read off of a card, and the card says what she's supposed to say. She didn't go in the next room and get one.
Stop. She admits it. Move on.
Okay. I don't have a problem, though, calling the police when they don't read the letter of the law. They're supposed to follow the law. They're supposed to give people their Fifth Amendment rights.
And they should have done that. We get that. What's the impact of the evidence in the trial moving forward? Let's just get to it.
Okay, I already said what I thought the impact was going to be, but, you know, legally, I'm wondering if there's any teeth left to Miranda with all these exceptions. So anyway, Michael Bryant and I will carry this argument on after the broadcast. We need to wrap things up, though. Thanks a lot to the panelists. We'll see you tomorrow right here on The Debrief at 5 o'clock on Law and Crime.